Okay, so this is what you should be able to identify on case study number 1. Just an introduction to articulators and using them really. We normally store articulators, or models on articulators with the pin slightly open so that the teeth don't crash together. So sometimes you just need to drop the pin down and make sure that the teeth are in contact. If you want to look at the ICP and the excursions, this is the centric lock at the back, so that puts it into purely hinging. Lift it up like so, and now you can do lateral excursions and protrusive excursions, and the top will come off as well. So when you're using these articulators, just be a little bit careful. Use them on the bench top, move them via the incisal pin here at the front. So this is case study 1. You can see it's been mounted in ICP. Well, you can't see, but it is mounted in ICP. So if we want to have a look at the occlusal contacts, ICP to start with. Again, to make sure the teeth are contacting. I've lifted the pin up slightly. If we're going into lateral excursions, we can move the pin like so, and move the maxilla relative to the mandible, and likewise into protrusive excursion there. So I've got some articulating silk here. This is slightly thicker than the GHM paper. It marks the models more clearly, so that's why I'm using it in this case. Tend to use this articulating silk with dentures rather than for restorative work. So here I'm just going around marking the ICP contacts for this case. Make sure that you've had the cloth between each of the opposing teeth, and you've just tapped gently down. And this silk should mark quite readily, so you don't have to worry about drying and so on. You can see we've got ICP contacts on the posterior teeth generally. Heavier one on the 5 there. Very light contact on the cingulum of the restoration that we're interested in. It doesn't look a heavy contact at all. So now we can pop the articulator back together. And I've just got some green silk now just to show the excursion. So of course we're interested in the protrusive excursion with this case. So I've just popped the silk in between the anterior teeth. I'm just going to move the articulator into its protrusive excursion. And then this is what you should have found, that we see all the guidance, or the anterior guidance, pretty much on that single restoration, which obviously isn't ideal. Just to check, I'm going to put the silk across all of the anterior teeth at the same time, and you can see there that predominantly the guiding tooth is that restoration. So now we can think about what we would do in that situation, how we would resolve the problem, how we could prevent the problem. So if we're making a single restoration in this situation where we're conforming to the existing occlusion, typically restorations will be made on handheld models in the laboratory, and the technician will make a big effort to ensure that the ICP contact is correct, and then just using handheld models try and get the guiding surfaces of the restorations correct, in this case a single restoration, and make that harmonise with the adjacent teeth. But if it's handheld models, there's a limit to what can be done in the laboratory. So the emphasis, if you're working on handheld models or asking for the work to be done on handheld models, is on the clinician when fitting the restoration to check ICP, check lateral and protrusive excursions, and adjust accordingly. If you want a restoration to be made more accurately, you're going to have to pay the money and get the models mounted on an articulator such that the technician can move the models in the same way as the teeth move in the patient's head. And in that way, they have got a better chance of getting the guidance correct. If you really want to go for it, so if we have this kind of situation where we've got a deep overbite and we want to get the guidance right and we're restoring 2 or more anterior restorations, then we'd look at using that technique where we record the anterior guidance onto the anterior guidance table, the incisal guidance table. And there's a video that I've put up of how we go about recording the anterior guidance onto the articulator. So bear that in mind. If you're asking for work to be done on handheld models, you need to check the restoration in ICP, protrusion, lateral excursion. If you want it made more accurately, so you've got less work to do in the clinic, you need to have the models mounted on an articulator. If you're doing 2 or more restorations simultaneously, you definitely want to head to an articulator, down the articulator route, get those restorations made accurately. If the guidance is significant, like this case, look at recording the anterior guidance. If you're doing more than 2 restorations or it's a challenging situation, really consider taking a face-bow registration. It's the work of a moment to take a face-bow registration, and that's going to make the accuracy of the mounting of the models that little bit better, so the articulator will mimic the movements of the mandible more accurately. Okay, so I hope that's relatively clear. You've got the blurb in your course books about the background to this case. Hopefully you can read that, watch this through again, and have a good idea about how you would resolve this problem. So if it presents now, it needs adjusting and the guidance spreading over the adjacent teeth. So on your sticker that's in your book, you've got a sticker that looks something like this. It's got the 2 situations, the problem and the solution. Okay, I hope that helps.